Welcome back to Tam's Classy Creations, the channel where we break down projects so even a beginner can do it. Today is the second part of the Quilt As You Go video I released a few weeks ago. I'll be showing you how to put blocks together with sashing. It's a Quilt As You Go method. Wait till you see how this turns out. It's gonna be beautiful. Anyway, before we get started, please hit the like button. Now, if you need the material list, I'll put it in the description. I appreciate you watching. Let's get into the video. We should have 20 of these 9.5-inch blocks that we made in a previous video. Now we're going to put them together in a Quilt As You Go method, which there are a lot. So we are going to take and make 5 rows of 4. So we'll have 4 across. So we're going to concentrate on just making the 5 rows. And what we're going to do, I've taken the backing material and cut 3-inch strips by 9.5, the length of the block. And we're going to sew them to the back of the block and the back of your fabric that you would want to use. I have measured and drawn a 1/4-inch line, so I have something to follow because I'm really like to be accurate with these. So we're going to stitch it to the back, and then we're going to connect it to the next one, the same thing. Connect it to the back. Then we're going to take the next one and we're going to attach it to the back, and the next one, and one more. So we'll have 4 across. So I'm going to take that to the sewing machine and stitch that. Okay, now that we have our rows together, we are going to make some sashing to go between these blocks. Now, sashing is really just rectangles of fabric placed between blocks, and they can have cornerstones. You could have all kinds of maybe squares put on, all kinds of things. And what it does is you want to unify the blocks together. So you could also just do plain strips. So I'm going to show you what kind of sashing strips we're going to do. Now, what I do, we need to do 15. We needed 15 of these backings cut 3-inch by 9.5. So now, for the sashing, we need 15 strips just for the rows, cut 9.5 by 5. Then I also need some of my colors. I just did all my solids that I picked up in all my pieces here. So I need 2 squares cut 2 3/4 inch, and I'll need 2 squares for the other side of our 9.5-inch rectangle. Now, here's what it looks like when we're done. And then so we'll need 30 sets of the squares, because we'll need 4 per rectangle. Now, what I do after I have my squares sewed on, and I'll demonstrate how I do that, I iron on a piece of fusible fleece. I get the kind that's just fusible on one side, and I make sure I get the middle, I line it up, and I iron that on. Then what I do is I just fold it in on my fleece here on each side. And what I usually get is something that doesn't quite come together all the way, and I want that. So I want this to be just over 2.5 inches wide, so it will hide my seams. I just want it just to be over. So That is what we're making to put our sashing strips between our blocks. Now what we're going to do, we're going to place one of the squares on the end of our 9.5 inch rectangle. Now we need to line that up with the corner. Make sure that your end where you have marked your triangle, that it goes to the center, beyond the center, but make sure it goes that way. We don't want to stitch it on this way. Won't work. So we're going to stitch, and I like to, we're going to stitch really close to the line, but I always like to stitch one thread width just to this side of the line. Now I would take this over to my cutting board and cut it 1/4 inch. And I can finger press it here, but I probably would take it to my ironing board and press that. Then we're going to put the other piece going to the center where you drew your lines end to end on your square, and I'm going to stitch that. Then I'll cut this about 1/4 inch. Finger press it. And that's one of our ends. And we'll just do it again with the orange. Cut it. Okay, now we have one made, and I'll demonstrate how we put the fleece on it. Now, when I'm going to place the fusible fleece, this is the fusible side, I always just measure and put a mark in the middle. So here I made a line down the center of our rectangle, and then I went out 1.25 inches on each side, just a little over, so that I have a good place to put this down. And I would put a cloth over here, press that down really good, and then I can fold these sides in. Okay, now when you get your sashings made, we can put them on your rows. So how I like to do that is with a little bit of Elmer's glue. And what I do, I put just a little drop every 3/4 of an inch or so. And then I will put this on, maybe put some clips here to keep it on, and I'll do the same on the other side. And these should cover that seam. Now, one thing I failed to mention, while you're making these 15 sashings for just the rows, you'll want to lay your quilt out so that you know the way you want it, you know, mixing your colors. But what you'll want to do, even though we're going to put sashing and everything there, you need to make this one for here. You need these colors when eventually you're going to put these rows together. That will be our step after we get this done. You want them to match. So you need to make sure you have 2 of each on each of the rows. And this one, on this row, you would want an orange one here. So just make sure that you do that. Now we need to stitch all of the sashings on the quilt rows. And remember, they're attached with glue. So what I like to do to make them invisible, I use this Superior Threads Monopoly, and it is 100 weight invisible polyester monofilament thread, and it really does make it invisible. Now we're going to use a zigzag stitch on the machine, and I like to set mine at a 3 wide and 2.5 in length. Now, I don't back tack my zigzag stitch, but you should have a button on your machine that if you push it, your needle will go up and down through the fabric in the same place, and that knots it. So I'm going to do that at the beginning and the end of each sashing that I put on. So I'm going to stitch down this one, come back up this one, down this one, come back up. The next step, we need to put our rows together. And I like to put 2 rows together and then 3 rows together, and the last step is connecting the 2. It's just easier to sew. We put it together similar to the blocks. We'll need a 3-inch piece of the backing. Now for the length, we can do it a couple ways. So we have, each of the blocks were 9.5 inch, but finished they're 9 inch. So these 2 are 9 inch. Now these 2, we need to take this all the way to the end. We're going to be putting binding on it, but they measure 9.25 still because we only have 1 seam in them. So we have 2 blocks that are 9, 2 blocks that are 9.25. Then we have 3 sashings, and remember we cut it 3 inches, but finished it is 2.5. So we have 3 of those at 2.5. So that measurement would be 44 inches. Now another way, if you've sewed it just a little bit bigger, you know, everybody stitches just a little bit different. If your 1/4 inches were just a little over, this is what I also like to do. I also like to measure it. Now it should be around 44, and mine measure about 43.5. So that is how long I'm going to cut my strips. So again, we're going to do it the same way we put those on. We're going to start and we're going to pin it to the back. And we're going to go all the way down a 1/4 inch seam so that the inside here will measure 2.5. And after I do the one side, I'm going to do the other side. and I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch and another 1/4 inch on this side. And you will need 4 of these strips. Now I'm going to stitch the 1/4 inch down both sides and attach these 2 rows together. I'm going to be back tacking at the beginning and end. And I also switch back to my regular thread. I only want to use the mono poly for that top stitching zigzag when we're attaching the sashings. When you're pinning the second side, make sure you line up. I think it's easier to pin at the end, pin at your sashings, and then pin the rest between your blocks. Now this is how your rows will look when you get that 3-inch strip in. Now we are going to make sashing strips to go the whole length of the rows. And here is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to make stars at all the cornerstones of our sashing. So this is how we're going to do it. It's actually pretty simple. It's just a little bit different than when we did our blocks together. So we'll take this row. Do you remember in the video we made this with the 2 blocks that were 2 3/4 inch, and I showed you how to do those. So in the rows, or in the blocks, we would be stopping at this and putting our 2 1/2 inch fusible fleece on. But we're not going to do that. We need to add some more. We need to put them all together before we do that. So here is one of the things we're going to be doing. We would lay out our pieces we need, and these are the pieces that we need to have our stars all together. Now, for the center of the stars, I wanted to have something that was striped and I wanted it to go on the diagonal. I didn't want the stripes up and down, because if you didn't sew it quite right, I didn't want to do that. So I cut a 3-inch strip, just like I'd be doing binding, on the diagonal on the 45 degree on my striped fabric. And then after I cut my 3-inch strip, then I would cut it into 5-inch strips. And the reason I did that is because these are 5-inch. Remember, when you put them around your fusible fleece, they don't quite come together because we need it just a little bigger than 2 1/2 to cover our seams. So then what I would do, I cut them 5 inches. So I will lay one here and one here and one down here. And I have pink, and then I need another pink one to finish that. So what I do, I do 1/4 inch seams. So I would run a 1/4 inch seam, and then I would attach this one right sides together on this 1/4 inch seam, and all the way down, matching my sashings. Then when I get that done, I have something that looks like this. It's a long strip. So then what I would do, remember how we made some markings You know, I marked with pens that are the iron off the friction pens, and I iron marks for me to iron on the fusible fleece. So once I get that, I press all of these. I did press my seams going toward the center block. Then I press my fusible fleece, and then what I'll do is I'll take it to the ironing board and I will press my sides down. And then I will have a piece, a long strip around 43.5 to 44 inches to put, to lay on my, right here for my sashing. And I will go do that, and then I will show you how we put this on. This is what your strip will look like when you get all the centers of the stars together. So what I like to do, I like to make sure I get the center. So I make a few marks like we did on the blocks, putting them together. I like to make a mark at the center. Oh, that was kind of off there. Here's my mark. So then I like to go 1.25 inches from that mark, and I make another mark on each side. And I go all the way down my strip. Then what I do, I have cut my fusible fleece in a 2.5 inch strip, just like we did for the blocks, except this one's longer. We need it about 44 inches long. Then I take it to the ironing board, and I have my marks, and it's really easy to press that on. I use the heat side down, and I take it all the way down my strip and I press it. Then after I do that, I'm able to come back and press my sides up. So I have a sashing strip that is just about, just over 2.5 inches wide. The next step is to glue this sashing strip down. Now, when we were gluing the blocks, it wasn't as hard as this is. We need to line up some things. So I actually like to start in the middle. So I'm going to put my dots here. And remember, I'm just using a washable school glue, Elmer's. So I need to get the centers lined up the best I can. And I need to cover the stitching, just cover that stitch line. So I got this one lined up good. I'll go to this one. So I'm going to run my glue down. It takes a while to dry, so I have some play time. I will, after I'm done here, I will actually put something heavy on here until it dries. And I just go to the end. And I'll take this down on this side. I'll have to get some books on this one. I have just a little, I'll have to just stretch that just a little. So I'm going to make sure my blocks, let me get to the end. So let me get some heavy stuff on here. Then when I take this to the machine, I'm going to put in the invisible monopoly thread, and we're going to do that small zigzag just like we did here. Now I'm going to stitch this just like I did on the rows with 3 wide zigzag and 2.5 length of stitch, and I'm going to knot it at the beginning and end, which I'm going to use that stitch that goes up and down in the same place. Our finished quilt, once you get the rows together, measures about 44 by 56, which that's a pretty good size lap quilt. So all I'm going to do is bind it. So I've cut my binding strips 2 1/4 inches, and I have folded them and pressed them. So all we have to do is bind our quilt. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you need to watch the first part to learn how to make the blocks, click here. Otherwise, have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.